Nearly 1,000 years ago, spurred on by the troublesome days of the Middle Ages, there came into being cooperative endeavor for the mutual protection of the cooperating parties. Out of this cooperative endeavor came, among other things, universities. Workmen seeking protection and the right to develop their pursuits under the protection of peace formed guilds. These guilds for labor and trade were object lessons in the power of cooperative effort for protective purposes. Scholars saw the practical value of these efforts and created guilds where they could study and teach in comparative safety. In so doing, they formed the beginnings of colleges and universities. But of more significance, they created guilds of academic freedom. Protection from physical assault, which featured the formation of other guilds, and safeguarding from financial losses were of lesser importance to scholars than they were to artisans. Wedded to peace and to poverty, the scholars of the Middle Ages were not so liable to molestation from either assault or from robbery. As opportunities for study developed, however, absolute freedom to seek and to discuss truth became necessary. As small beginnings in academic freedom were achieved, the scope of truth was broadened and was made to include the tenets of human liberties. Thus, the colleges and the universities early became veritable houses of refuge for truth, sanctuaries for human liberties. As university after university was added to the great family of higher institutions, each accepted this mission. And when a little over 100 years ago, the plans were developed for America's contribution to this family, the State University, that institution was started upon its course in a similar manner. Not only should it teach, not only should it train, but it should discover new truth and should conserve old truths. Here, as under the protection of the one-time guild, critical study and deliberative judgment could secure evaluation of reforms which action offered and could teach the changed principles which this critical evaluation had declared lasting. Thus briefly has been described a function of universities believed to be of paramount importance, the function of evaluating new offerings of truth and of conserving proven portions of it. Governments, even the legislative branches of government, are agencies of action. Theoretically, the legislative branch of government is deliberative, and the senates of nations were one time filled with the elders and the wise. The public in times of stress, the executive branch of governments, and expediency drive legislative agents into action. While all admit that certain conditions call loudly for vigorous action, the perpetuation of liberty calls with equal insistence for deliberation and for critical evaluation of all action, all that is proposed, and for all that is done. In times of stress, action is not only necessary, but it is popular. But democracy may or may not be preserved by such action. Someone must critically evaluate, and those who evaluate must possess the rarest abilities in forming judgments, intellectual honesty of the highest degree, and unflinching courage fostered by the conditions of independence. The qualified agencies for this evaluation may usually be found in the colleges and universities of a country. As a nation passes through one of those great crucial points of history, where it is changing from the conditions of a past period to the characteristics of a new era, more than at any other time in its history are universities needed. The things of proven value in one era are not to be thrown aside with the advent of the new. The foundations of a new day are bedded in the established principles of yesterday. Reformers in the great work they have to do are not prone to conserve. The promotion of a new plan seems to call for the discreditment and the displacement of that which is old. This is not a criticism of those who promote and who reform, but rather an attempted pointing out of what seems to be one essential characteristic of reform. Could a higher critic become a missionary? Could a Marx saver become a social reformer? The reformer and the conservator cannot ordinarily be found in one person, or even among the adherents of one school of thought. Nevertheless, conservation is no less important than is new construction. It is as conservators of civilization that universities, at history's points of crux, must find in part the great and enduring function which is the main point of this discussion. To make a university a conservator does not mean that it is not to be an apostle of change. When changes are brought forward, it has been already said that the universities become the agents of critical evaluation. When a proposed change has been proved, there should be no more vigorous teacher of change than the same university. Only the universities must be responsible for the proving. They must never become the agents of propaganda. When this government was created, its constitution recognized three divisions of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. The development of democracy, as synonymous with liberty, has been during the period of the supremacy of parliamentary government, or said differently, during the dominance of the legislative branch of government. Because of numerous reasons, power has been gradually slipping from this branch of government, which perhaps has best represented deliberation, conservatism, and the perpetuation of the customs and the mores of a country. Ever-increasing power has been transferred to the executive branch of government. This transfer has usually been in the name of action sought in times of stress. This change can be easily noticed in local government, in state government, in national government, and among the national governments of the world. But without regard to the why and to the wherefore of this transfer of power, such transfer has happened, and it makes necessary a proper agency of deliberation. If the divisions of government should be established today, education would probably rank equally with the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Perhaps it is a corollary of this proposition that higher education must more and more function as the deliberative, critical, and conservative phase of government. Universities are the crucibles in which society will melt democracy, fascism, communism, the creed of the Nazi, and the philosophy of the Soviet. The dross will be thrown out, and the gold, where gold is found, will be handed on to posterity. Universities are also the balances in which will be weighed the Mussolinis, the Hitlers, the Stalins, the Lavals, the Baldwins, the Roosevelts, and the other rulers of the present day. The good and the bad alike will be placed in these balances, the one to be remembered, the other to be forgotten. Out of such processes will come the civilization of nations. A nation's culture, when that term is synonymous with its civilization, will be achieved by such processes. A nation's universities are finally the molds in which its highest types of culture are cast. The constants of that civilization, its cornerstone, and its parts which endure, come from the crucible, the balances, and the molds.